meeting on Mr. Albus's plastic study, which has been very interesting. We have with us some familiar faces. We have Mr. Diorio, Ms. Ryan. We have Danny Drouin, Jacqueline Gonsalves, all from Environment and Climate Change Canada. And we have an hour of witnesses, and then we go in camera for some committee business. So without, how many people will be speaking for 5 minutes? Just one or two or?
Just one, Mr. Chair.
Just one. Okay, so that leaves more time for questions. So who will be speaking? Will it be who will be speaking?
It will be myself, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Ryan, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you to discuss single-use plastics and our comprehensive approach to managing plastics pollution. I am pleased to be here as part of your study on the government's proposed ban on single-use plastic items and designating plastics under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. We appreciate the committee's interest in this issue. Today, I'm accompanied by Marc Diorio, Assistant Deputy Minister of the Science and Technology Branch, and Danny Drouin, Director General of the Plastics and Waste Management Directorate. We all agree that we need to do better at managing plastics and in keeping the value of plastics in the economy and out of our environment. Approximately 86% of Canada's plastic waste is landfilled, representing a lost value of up to $8 billion. Plastic pollutes the water and harms wildlife when it enters the environment. Canadians expect action. In recent surveys, 86% of Canadians have indicated their support for a ban on harmful single-use plastics, and industry recognizes the need for improvements across the value chain. The government has developed a comprehensive plan to achieve zero plastic waste by 2030. All environment ministers under the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment have endorsed the goal of keeping plastics in the economy and out of the environment. We are working together to achieve this goal under the Canada-wide strategy and action plan on zero plastic waste. We need to take action to eliminate plastic pollution and reduce the amount of plastic that ends up in landfills or the environment. This can be achieved through greater prevention, collection, innovation, and value recovery, and by transitioning to a more circular economy for plastics. This transition involves new forms of plastics, new technologies that incentivize and support improved recovery of resources from products and packaging, and a shift in how we design and manage plastic products. Moving to a circular economy will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and pressures on the environment, while capturing the economic benefits. Achieving reductions in plastic waste requires the national approach in order to address market issues, create the conditions necessary for investment in recycling and recovery, and support actions at all stages of the plastic life cycle. This means investing in research through the Canada's Plastic Science Agenda, innovation through the Canadian Plastics Innovation Challenges, and community actions, for instance. Partnerships are critical to developing solutions and to increasing the recovery of plastics, and to ensure that producers are responsible for their plastic waste. In October, Environment and Climate Change Canada, along with Health Canada, published the Science Assessment of Plastic Pollution. The report summarizes the state of the science and confirmed that plastic pollution is ubiquitous in the environment and that microplastic pollution poses an ecological hazard, including physical harm to animals and their habitat. The science assessment recommends taking action to reduce macro and microplastics that end up in the environment. To support this broad agenda, ECCC will use the authorities under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, CEPA, to regulate certain plastic manufactured items. This will allow the government to enact regulation to change behaviors at key stages in the life cycle of plastic. Products such as design, manufacture, use, disposal, recovery, in order to reduce pollution and create the conditions to achieve a circular plastics economy. The department also issued a discussion document that laid out an integrated management approach for plastic products to prevent waste and pollution. It includes regulatory and non-regulatory actions, such as restrictions or bans on selected harmful single-use plastic items, performance requirements for recycled content, and actions to improve, expand, and make extended producer responsibility policies more consistent across Canada. The items identified as candidates for a proposed ban are prevalent in the environment, are suspected to cause environmental harm and have low or no recycling rate and have readily available alternatives. The transition to a circular economy for plastics represents a significant environmental and economic opportunity. Improving Canada's approach to managing plastics could reduce carbon pollution by 1.8 megatons a year, generate billions of dollars in revenue, and create around 42,000 jobs. I would like to close by thanking all of you for your work to understand the serious issue that plastic pollution presents. I look forward to the committee's recommendations on how to keep plastics in the economy and out of our environment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Madame Ryan. Alors, le fait d'avoir une intervenante seulement, là, ça simplifie la tâche un petit peu. On peut poursuivre directement aux questions. Alors, j'ai pour la première ronde là, de 6 minutes, j'ai M. Albas pour lancer la ronde. M. Albas, vous avez 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I'd like to welcome all of our guests here today and thank you for the work you do for Canadians. I would like to start, Mr. Chair, by talking about a little bit of what we've heard from the disability community. So I've spoken with some of my constituents. We've heard from the disability community as well as several witnesses here in the study that exemptions should exist in the bans for people who need these items for accessibility reasons, specifically plastic straws. What do you have to say in terms of the government's positions on exemptions with plastic straws for persons with disabilities?
Ms. Ryan, I guess, or
yes.
Someone else? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so in terms of our discussion document laid out the proposed approach with respect to limiting or restricting uses for problematic single-use plastics, including straws, and in there noted the importance of being able to ensure that we can address and meet the requirements from an accessibility perspective. So that's one of the important considerations that's being taken into account in terms of how the approach for banning or restricting the use of straws in terms of what will come.
Okay, because when I questioned witnesses in regards to this, none of them had any clue how this would work. So if that's the case, then how does the government imagine people who need these products for accessibility will access them? This ban will shut down all production in Canada and presumably ban imports. How will restaurants get the stock to have on hand for persons with disability or accessibility issues?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. And so in terms of how the regulatory approach will be designed for advancing the bans and restrictions on the single-use plastics items, it's exactly these types of considerations that are taken into account in terms of how the regulations get put forward. And so considerations around how you ensure that people with certain disabilities are able to access the material that they need is taken into account. And through the feedback that we've heard on our discussion document, we are engaging with those individuals to ensure that a proposed approach will address their needs and take their considerations into account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But again, I would ask if there is a problem with supply, because domestically, it sounds like the government has said to industry, you will not produce these. Are you planning on then implementing some sort of system to allow outside of Canada product to be brought in? Wouldn't that create some questions about management of that? Would people have to apply for an exemption to bring in a substance from outside the country?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. The details on how the bans or restrictions on the single-use plastic items have not yet been forward. So the government has not indicated that it will put those types of restrictions in place. And it's in fact considering the feedback and comments that have come in from stakeholders with respect to these very important issues. And the design of the regulation will take them into account. In addition, when the proposed regulations get put forward, there will be a summary of comments that have come in, and there will be an indication of how those comments have been addressed, so that stakeholders will have a clear understanding of how the measure, or how the proposed measure takes these issues into account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, with all due respect, as a parliamentarian, I represent 105,000 people, and many of them either have questioned the policy, and for you just to say, we know that there's a problem, but we have no answers. Look, if persons with a disability, some of the most economically vulnerable people in our society, have to absorb the costs of importing plastic straws while others get free ones in restaurants, wouldn't that be a scenario where it would be punishing people with a disability?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. It's not clear to me, though, why that would be the consideration that that you feel is being put forward. As I mentioned, the discussion document laid out the important considerations that would actually be taken into account in terms of how to design a ban or a restriction with respect to single-use plastic items, including straws. So those very considerations about how do you ensure that people with disabilities do have the appropriate access to what they need in terms of being able to manage their disability is an important consideration, and those issues will be taken into account in terms of the specifics of how the regulation is designed and where the point of application of the regulation is and how those flexibility measures are put into account. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'm more confused, and I'm happy to hear you have considerations, but is a ban no longer a ban? These are important questions, and ones I hear about from constituents. If several witnesses have suggested there should be accessibility exemptions, there needs to be clear plans in place to make those happen. We need to be removing barriers to accessibility, not piling more on. And you have no answers on this. The dog ate my homework, excuse, I don't think will fly, particularly with the people that have told me that they already feel overburdened because they feel, am I going to have to carry around plastic straws along with their person or on their wheelchair? It's incredibly disappointing that you don't have a basic answer to say, is this really even a ban?
Well, that's more of a comment than a question because we've run out of time, but there'll be opportunities to answer that if the witnesses wish in regards to questions from other witnesses. So we'll go to Ms. Sachs for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. It's great to see all of you, and thank you for the hard work that you do on behalf of Canadians. Ms. Ryan, in your opening remarks, you spoke about us needing an integrated national approach to reducing plastic pollution with regulatory and non-regulatory actions. And I'd ask if you could expand on the work the government's doing towards this and what is happening at the federal level. Basically, how is the government working with the provinces and territories to achieve this national approach?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. And so the Government of Canada does have a comprehensive approach to managing plastic waste. And as I mentioned, the discussion document that was issued in October of 2020 laid out that comprehensive approach, including the approach to how we would look to restrict or ban single-use plastic items. It also talked about the work that we're doing with the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment under the Zero Plastic Waste strategy there and the action plan, the work that's being done in support of innovation. We're advancing work in terms of the development of standards, of work with respect to product design, remanufacturing work, work necessary in terms of how you manage the recycling and what's needed to enhance the capabilities of the recovery system, in addition to work being done to advance standards that are needed, for instance, for compostability or with respect to recycled content, for instance. In addition, we have a comprehensive science agenda. We've put out innovation challenges and have been supporting industry in their innovative work that they've been doing to create solutions and find new approaches. I believe you've heard from a number of those companies in the past while through the course of your study. In addition, the the department has been advancing work along with Health Canada with respect to personal protective equipment and innovative approaches to new alternatives for that, as well as that's creating a new pressure for the system. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. And I can see there's quite a robust and comprehensive consultation process that has been undertaken and will be undertaken as we move forward. So on that note, I'd like to ask a follow-up question, if I may. Can you explain the regulatory process behind listing something as on Schedule 1 of SEPA? And does it happen out of the blue, or is there evidence and an explanation provided and a comment period for us to get feedback?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that comment. The way the regulatory process works is, in order for us to access our authorities under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, we must first add an item to Schedule 1 of SEPA. We put forward a proposal to add plastic manufactured items to Schedule 1 of SEPA in the fall of 2020. There's a mandatory public comment period that's required under the legislation, and we seek public comments and feedback with respect to that. In addition, under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, there is an opportunity for stakeholders to issue a notice of objection and to call for a board of review. In the case of our proposed listing of plastic manufactured items, we did get a number of notices of objections and calls for board of review from stakeholders. The minister has to have due regard for those notices of objections and the call for a board of review, and needs a comprehensive review is undertaken to determine whether or not there was any new science that would change the findings that were used to support the decision to put forward a proposal to add plastic manufactured items to Schedule 1 of SEPA. In the case of the proposed order, the minister has come to the conclusion that there was no new science or information that would change the conclusion and his outcome in terms of his recommendation to add plastic manufactured items to Schedule 1 of SEPA, due to the concern that I mentioned with respect to the danger that they pose to the environment and to wildlife. And so therefore the minister has denied those calls for notice of objection. The next stage of the process is to finalize the order, and then the order goes through cabinet, and if it's approved, receives governor in council's approval, and then becomes final. From there, we now have access to our authorities under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and then can put forward targeted measures to respond to specific issues. And those can include some of the items that I've already mentioned. A proposal to put forward a regulation requires us to go forward with a draft regulation that has to go to, if it's approved, goes to cabinet and then is posted in the Canada Gazette, again for a mandatory 60-day public comment period. If there's trade issues, this period is longer. We then have regard for those comments and look to see whether or not further adjustments are needed. A regulatory impact assessment statement accompanies a proposed regulation, and it looks at the cost, benefits, the impacts with respect to the regulatory proposal, and puts forward that information as well for public consideration. We then publish a summary of comments and determine whether or not the regulation is going forward with changes or without changes. It then goes back to cabinet for consideration. If it's approved, it again is published in Canada Gazette Part 2 as a final regulation, and then will take effect on the coming into effect date that's put forward in the regulation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go on to Madame Posé, please.
Oui, merci. Merci à tous les témoins d'être présents. Monsieur le Président, j'ai un problème, c'est que j'entends la traduction anglaise en même temps que je parle.
Je ne suis pas un...
I'm not an expert, but I do hope that now it's okay. I'm afraid the interpreter was on the wrong channel, so I believe now it's regulated. It's now been resolved.
Properly.
Donc vous avez choisi une langue.
So you've chosen a language. Is it working for everyone now? Yes, you can.
Est-ce que vous avez choisi?
Yes. I'll start again. Can you hear something, or is it okay? No, I'm not. I was hearing the English translation. That's what I was saying, but it's resolved now. It seems like we're now on the right track. So thank you very much to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Ryan, in your presentation, you talked about the Canadian Council Environment Ministers. But when we look at what the Council does, they're not talking about reducing plastic production at all. And it seems when we look at the facts, the Canadian Council is not really working on a circular economy. In phases 1 and 2 of the action plan for reducing plastic, we've got big ambition, but there's lots of objectives, but not much action. And I'll give you an example. In phase 1 of this strategy, when we're talking about extended producer responsibility, and that was meant to be completed by December 2020. And I'd like to recall that this plan that was talking about extended producer responsibility was adopted in 2009. So it took 11 years. That's a long time to not see any results. There was just a strategy that was tabled. But you've said to yourself that this is a serious problem. There's ecological hazards. So when something is urgent, we need to act urgently. So my question is, how many meetings have there been with the governments at different levels? And how is the work actually progressing with extended producer responsibility? And is there a real working agenda that's planned to continue with this work so that we can actually get to the action phase? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. I don't have the number of meetings that has taken place with me, but that's something that we could certainly send to you, because there have been several meetings, in particular with the work group. There's a working group that's dedicated to dealing with this issue. And there's also meetings with the deputy ministers and other ministerial levels dealing with the strategy and the action plan. I'm stopping you there because we talk about an action plan, but it seems to me that we've been waiting for this for 11 years to really see the action plan. But I'd like to come back to a recent report from Greenpeace, which indicated that the Canadian Zero Waste Strategy was doomed to failure, and it was based on a WAPA 2019 studies, so to get rid of 90% away from landfill, we would have to spend up to $8.2 billion. So have you got any recommendations about the funding of programs that deal with this issue of plastics, this problem of plastics in Canada? Is that part of your work to actually develop recommendations on the funding side of things? Because there's dire needs. We know that the sector just receives crumbs compared to those who are in the oil industry and who deal with plastic resins and who are producing of this. They've got lots of money, but when it comes to recycling and zero plastic waste, there's not much money at all. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that question. So there is a dedicated work plan for the agenda on simple-use plastics, on single-use plastics. And this action plan really is targeted about this. You've talked about extended producer responsibility and the targets that were set in 2009, but these were not targets for plastic specifically. So now there are specific plastic targets. And in the action plan, we are working on guides to accompany these programs, and these should come out before the end of the year. You've talked about funding, and that is another aspect in this work plan. Before the end of the year, there will also be an assessment of the infrastructure and what's needed to actually improve all of this throughout the life cycle of plastic. So that's something to keep a close eye on. And it will come out this year as well. There will also be an initiative in terms of access to funding for this type of activity. So that is one of the specific items in the action plan. We're working closely with our counterparts in the provinces and territories on this. It's part of the action plan phase 1 for the zero plastic waste strategy. So if correctly understood, your role is also to come out with recommendations on the funding side of things. I'd like to come back to the initial meeting that we had on single-use plastics with Mr. Rockman, who's a specialist in marine biology and the impact of plastic on biology. And he indicated that the microplastic concentration could have tripled in the Great Lakes. That's quite close to here. By 2030, it could have tripled. So out of the 2.2 million for research within the strategy, what is the amount for research dealing with microplastics, if we bear in mind what's happening in the Great Lakes? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that question as well. I will give the floor to Mr. Mark Diorio on this. You have around 25 seconds to do so. Mr. Diorio? Yes, I'll try to avoid being on mute. So we've had a call for proposals on different subjects. I don't have the proportion that's exactly devoted to microplastics because it's dealing with the whole life cycle of plastics. But once we get that information, I can send it to you. Thank you very much for that, says the chair. So now, Mr. Backrach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur. Merci.
Ms. Ryan and her team for being with us today and answering our questions. My first question, Ms. Ryan, relates to the timeline. I believe the government has stated the regulations are going to be in place by the end of 2021. Could you inform us as to whether things are on track and what the expected date for the regulation to be finalized and come into force might be?
That was for Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, that's correct.
Ms. Ryan?
Sorry, thank you.
I think she's looking for something.
I am. I'm looking to make sure I don't mislead you with my answer. So apologies for that.
Not a problem.
So with respect to the work to advance the regulations, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, we issued the discussion document, which laid out the proposal in terms of how we would approach it for public comments. And we received a number of notices of objections and calls for boards of review. We've have responded to those notices of objection and boards of review. And the minister made his decision and recently published on the CEPA registry his response, which was to deny the board of review, and he did so after careful consideration of the information that was put before him, and that the objectors hadn't raised sufficient uncertainty or doubt in the scientific consideration underlying the proposed order. We're currently going through the considerable number of comments that we've received on the discussion document as well, and specifically with respect to the approach on banning or restricting certain problematic single-use plastics items, along with other comments on the discussion document. We're targeting publishing the proposed regulations for public comments later on in 2021. In addition, we're undertaking, as I mentioned, those follow-ups with the accessibility community to ensure that the design of that regulation will take into account their needs as well as others. So the government is on track to publish draft regulations in Canada Gazette later on in 2021 for consultation, and then following a period of transition, looking to implement the regulations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Next, the 6 single-use plastic items that are proposed to be covered under the ban were selected in part based on the existence of readily available alternatives. What does your department consider the readily available alternatives for the 6 items that are proposed for the ban?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. So in terms of readily available alternatives, those issues were laid out in the discussion document, but we do look to see that there are alternatives that are available that fulfill the same purpose, that are on the market, and so for each of the items that that assessment is undertaken. So, for instance, with respect to stir sticks, there's an assessment undertaken to determine are there other alternatives to a single-use plastic stir stick that can fulfill the same function. For instance, with respect to we call them 6-ring carriers, but they're not really 6-ring carriers. Are there other alternatives that can fulfill the same purpose that's needed as that product, and so on? And so those considerations are assessed in terms of and were assessed in terms of identifying those proposed items that were put forward in the discussion document in October of 2020.
In fulfilling the same purpose, how does your department consider reusable items? So is the definition of same purpose essentially another single-use item that isn't plastic? Or does an alternative, a readily available alternative, include a durable, reusable item that serves that purpose?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for that comment. In terms of assessing whether an alternative is available, we consider a variety of factors, including whether there are durable and non-durable products, the ease and the purpose for which they serve, and so that it's ensuring that the functionality that product was providing is still available to the users, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Ryan, if reusable products were considered as readily available alternatives, would there not be a greater list of items that would meet the criteria set out in the proposed ban?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. So with respect to the criteria for which we're assessing these problematic single-use plastic items, we're looking to see those items that are found to be in the environment and potentially causing harm. We're looking to see whether or not they're hindering or having issues with respect to the recovery or the recycling functionality of things. We're looking to see that there are readily available alternatives. The alternative has to suit the purpose, and so it's not necessary that a durable product will be able to serve the same purpose as a non-durable product. These items are all very different in terms of their use and purpose. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to our second round now, the 5-minute round. We start with Mr. Redekop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Ryan, you were at this committee in March on the 17th, and I asked you about safety consultations with Agriculture Canada and the Canada Food Inspection Agency. It took a little bit, but you did confirm that you consulted Agriculture Canada and the CFIA. And I also asked some witnesses about this. And on April 26th, Philip Canton of the Retail Council of Canada spoke of the interactions between Environment Canada and Agriculture Canada. And he said this, and I quote, "They're not necessarily moving at the same pace when it comes to adjusting the requirements. Most of the reasons why certain companies are going with plastic packaging is because it's the only cost-viable solution on the market to comply with the requirements from Agriculture Canada," end quote. Now, this is from a witness whose members include Loblaws, Safeway, Metro, Walmart, etc. They're concerned that you haven't actually done proper consultations. So if the food retailers do not have faith in your consultation process, why should consumers?
Thank you, Mr. President, for that question. With respect to the consultation process that we've undertaken on the discussion document, it includes a 60-day public comment period. It includes outreach and engagement with specific communities, with the provinces and territories, with industry, and with others. I think with respect to the comment that you're hearing from committee members, there's a distinction between the issue that they're referring to, which is plastics used for food conservation in grocery stores and that, which are not items of the proposed ban for the single-use plastic items. The items that would relate to foodware are those that are used for takeout purposes, and there are specific ones with respect to what's being considered. With respect to our work with Agriculture Canada and CFIA, as well as with Health Canada, these issues are very important issues. Food safety, food security is extremely important, and ones that we take seriously and consider in terms of the design of any potential measure. And so those factors are important, and the elements that have been put forward with respect to a proposed ban do not address those specific items. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So your consultations with Agriculture Canada and CFIA, are they in 100% agreement with Environment Canada on this proposal, or have they raised concerns as to how this may affect food security?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that comment. We have an integrated approach, and we work across government with respect to the approach on the zero plastic waste agenda. And the Government of Canada's approach is one that is endorsed by the Government of Canada with respect to the proposals in terms of items that would be put forward for proposed bans. Those items are discussed and reviewed with our interdepartmental community, and we ensure that all of their issues and considerations are taken into account, because it is eventually a Government of Canada proposal that gets put forward, and so it's extremely important that issues of food security and other considerations are taken into account and addressed in the actions that are taken. So there's a number of measures that are advanced in terms of what would be issues that would be of importance to them in terms of how we move to recycled content and other considerations, and those technical considerations are very live, and we engage with them on that to ensure that any potential measure is appropriately designed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On a different note, Madam Ryan, one of the justifications that Mr. Wilkinson used to ban plastics was a study that Environment Canada commissioned by Deloitte called Canadian Plastics Industry Markets and Waste. Jim Getz of the Canadian Beverage Council mentioned it, and when I went looking for it, wouldn't you know it, ECC has removed it from its website, and it's no longer activated, it's no longer archived under the Open Government Initiative. I had to ask the Library of Parliament for a copy. The report does talk about the benefits of plastics and the virtues of circular recycling economy, but it barely mentions the ban and certainly makes no recommendation to ban plastics. So clearly the report your department is using to justify this policy doesn't match the policy outcome. So why did Environment Canada remove this report from its website, and who gave the go-ahead to scrub it from the Open Government Initiative, contrary to Treasury Board policy? Was it the Minister's office?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. And I'm not aware of the Deloitte study having been removed from the Government of Canada's website. I know that there was a shorter version of the report put forward, because the actual report itself is extremely voluminous and a number of feet deep, sorry for my non-metric analysis, and has been made available to those who've requested it. The full report was not put forward. It's too comprehensive. I may ask my colleague Danny Drouin to provide further details with respect to that.
Well, maybe he can do that in answer to another questioner. We go to Mr.
Perhaps,
Long.
Mr. Chair, just they can provide a written report to
Yeah, written answer would be, or so you're asking for the full report, or just a written answer?
I want to know why it was removed from the website.
Okay. Mr. Longfield for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Ms. Ryan for your testimony. The primary purpose of SEPA is to, quote, contribute sustainable development through pollution prevention, unquote. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 8 is to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. In your testimony, you mentioned a target savings of 1.8 megatons per year of GHG, and also 42,000 jobs. You've also talked about the integrated management approach. How are you going to be measuring against the Sustainable Development Goal 8 on job growth and on sustainability?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. I'm going to turn to Danny Drouin to answer that question.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to unmute. So the work to track the progress towards zero plastic waste, including the greenhouse gas emissions and the jobs, is underway. Working in particular with Statistics Canada. So currently, we don't have these numbers tracked. We're developing the framework and looking at the data and data gap in cooperation with Statistics Canada.
Okay, thank you. And I'm imagining that municipalities or provincial governments might have to report in through Statistics Canada. When I was in business, I had to report to head office how many tons of plastics we were recycling as part of my annual report. There was a job in getting that data, but we're using Statistics Canada, is that correct?
Correct, through the material flow studies that are published every second year, which you probably contributed, as you pointed out.
Okay, I can also say it wasn't my most favorite part of the job, but I knew it was important. Madam Ryan, we've had consistent feedback as we've had our witnesses speaking to us about the recycling standards being confusing or can be confusing for Canadians when they're varying across jurisdictions. We're looking at slightly different standards that some provinces, municipalities, and territories are using. What's the federal government doing to help align standards so that stakeholders across government levels are sure and that they have clear and concise regulations that follow for the users?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. That's one of the elements that's actually being advanced through the Canadian Councils of Ministers of the Environment. We are working to develop standards with respect to recycling and recycling, so not just recycling rates, but recycling contents. And I will turn to Danny Drouin to provide more details with respect to that.
Merci, Hélène. So the work on recycled content and other standards are being implemented by the department, working closely with provinces and territories. On recycled content in particular, there was in the discussion paper that was published in October, potential avenues and pathways to reach a 50% recycled content target by 2030, as per one of the goals of the Ocean Plastics Charter. As we progress to that analysis, and we're working with the Standard Council of Canada and other standard organizations to first scan the type of standards that exist, how are they used or not used, and what lessons learned we can draw from that. At that point, we will be looking also to re-engage with stakeholders on the basis of the discussion paper to go into more details. And in between, I should have probably mentioned that we've held a significant stakeholder conversation on the.
Could I ask just quickly, the provincial and territorial ministers, is that also part of your stakeholder consultations?
Very quickly, please, very briefly.
Yes, correct. I mean, in the context of the CCME work, yes. Okay. For example, we had participants from PTs. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll go to Madame Posé for 2.5 minutes, please.
Oui, alors.
Yes, thank you. So I've got 2.5 minutes, but I've got at least 4 questions. I'll start with the first one. In this study on plastics, we have heard from innovative producers who say that they're worried that their packaging that would be 100% recyclable or compostable, but it might be aimed by this ban measure. So can you please make that clear for producers who are worried about this ban?
Oui, merci, Monsieur.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. As I mentioned earlier, in the list, or perhaps I didn't mention the list, in the list of the articles that fall under the description of single-use plastics, packaging is not one of the articles covered. But I know that sometimes there's a bit of confusion about this. But yes, we want to establish standards as to what is necessary for packaging, and that's part of our action plan as well that we're working on with the provinces and territories. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that answer. Now, we know that consumption of plastic has exploded, it's doubled or tripled. So how can we meet these reduction objectives that we've got in the Ocean Plastics Charter, to which Canada is a signatory? It says there that 55% of the plastic should be recycled or reused, but in fact we've only got 9% that are covered by this at the moment, so there's a very big gap. So when it comes to the export of plastic waste for recycling outside of Canada, is that actually going to be counted in the percentage of recycled plastics or not? Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. If I've correctly understood, you're asking when we calculate the amount of plastic that's recycled, does it include the amount of plastic that's recycled outside of Canada? Well, I'll ask Danny Drouin to answer that question. I'm not in a position to respond. Danny Drouin, quickly. The answer is no. The 9% is based on the Deloitte study data and does not include any export statistics that would cover an export of plastic waste. Could you please put up the arm of your microphone, Mr. Drouin, then we can hear you better. So thank you very much, Mr. Posé. Now, Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to dive a little bit further into the criteria around the 6 items that have been proposed for the ban. And I'm curious, I didn't feel like I understood your answer around reusable items. And I'm wondering, for something like plastic beverage cups and lids, which I understand isn't included in the list of items proposed to be banned, are there not viable and readily available alternatives for products like that?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The items that have been identified for a ban or a restriction relate to those items specifically where they're found in the environment or likely to be found in the environment and causing harm, where they're causing problems for recycling or recovery, and where there are known alternatives. So with respect to beverage containers, so I think you're talking about plastic bottles, for instance, water bottles. Those items are items that are able to be recycled and are recycled in high numbers. So with respect to a target on banning or restricting, it's limited to those causing problems in the system of recycling and recovery, because remember, the objective here is to move to a circular economy and to keep the value of the plastics in the economy, but not in the environment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I suppose, Ms. Ryan, I'm curious about something like plastic lids, because it would seem that these are, to consider these as being disposable single-use plastic lids as being sort of something that doesn't have a readily available alternative. I'm trying to get at what the criteria are that your government uses to determine readily available alternatives. I don't know if maybe I'm not asking the question clearly enough, but and whether reusable items would be considered readily available alternatives.
Pretty briefly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I mentioned, with respect to reusable items, it won't be just reusable items that will meet the criteria, because not everybody will have a reusable item and may need to acquire the good. So we look to see that there is an alternative that will serve the same purpose that the single-use plastic item did. However, as part of our promotion, we actively encourage the reduce first. So use your own cup, don't need one, but where you do, there will still be an alternative that's available. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we'll go now to Ms. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually also want to talk about these 6 banned items, and from a number of different perspectives. Was there an evaluation, I haven't seen it and maybe I've just missed it, in terms of where all those products came from? So in Canada, where did the straws come from? How much is domestic produced versus internationally produced and imported? Has that assessment been done?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with respect to the work that's been done to date, we've put forward the framework for how decisions are made on selecting the items for a proposed ban or restriction. Now the work is going on with respect to the details on the specifications around that item. And that detail, when it comes out, will include the information specifically that you talked about, like how much is it, what's the economic value, etc.
Okay, so right now we don't know if the straws that are going to be banned are coming in from China versus internally produced. My next question is let's say there is a ban that moves forward and we have a company in Canada that tended to ship both within Canada and to the US. If the ban comes in place in Canada and it's not a legal product in Canada, will the ban extend to the company in terms of it being able to export to the United States? I know that has happened in other departments, so can you tell us definitively if that is going to happen with, let's say, a producer of one of the banned products in Canada?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. As I mentioned, the details of what will actually be in the regulations have not yet been put forward. When they are put forward, they will include considerations around, is the restriction with respect to imports, exports, things in transit? What's the point of application of the regulation? Are there considerations for exemptions or other assessment? Yeah. Is it a restriction or is it a ban?
Okay,
all of those things will be put forward in terms of the proposed regulations.
So right now we're banning 6 products. If I was a company that sold to the US, quite frankly, and employed 50, 60 people, I would be terrified in terms of this unknown. I mean, one is the known, but the other is the unknown. So, I know Canada, it's important, sovereignty is important, but we used to have a fairly robust regulatory cooperation council with the US. Is that process still in place, and are these conversations also happening within that format?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. I would have to turn to my colleagues outside of the department with respect to the scope of the regulatory cooperation agenda. With respect to single-use plastics items, there has been some discussions with respect to the work that's being advanced with the U.S., but it doesn't form the element of a regulatory cooperation item specifically.
Because I understood that was the table where these conversations could be happening, where so basically what I'm hearing is we've committed to a ban. We've committed to a ban with the regulatory rules to be in place. I understand it was by 2021. And there is many unknowns. And again, I think we all on this panel agree with the need to reduce plastic waste, agree with the circular economy, but I also think the lack of sort of T's being crossed and I's being dotted. And again, I look at a company in the riding I represent who all of a sudden was just told you can't export your product anymore. So he's had to close down his business and lay off a significant number of employees. those elements I think are important, and I think our businesses deserve that kind of information and knowledge, not to live with this horrific uncertainty. Thank you.
Okay, we have 30 seconds left. I don't know if there's an answer or if there's...
You know, certainly I would appreciate if it could be tabled with this committee, any documents or meetings or any work that has been done with the Regulatory Cooperation Council and any trade compliance analysis that has been done.
Okay, so that we'll if Ms. Ryan, if you could provide that to the committee in due course. We'll go now to our final questioner before we break to go in camera. Mr. Saini.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all the officials for all the work that you do on behalf of Canadians and for coming today and helping us with this study. Ms. Ryan, the question I want to ask to you is because I want to talk about the health side of that. And one of the things that we've heard from numerous witnesses is that plastics bioaccumulate in food chains and ecosystems. Could you provide some insight in how you assess the potential for a substance to bioaccumulate in a food chain when adding a substance to Schedule 1 and how this was done for plastics?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this question. I will turn to my colleague, Marc Diorio, to respond to this question.
Yes, thank you very much. The assessment itself considered what was published and what was available in the literature, and the science assessment itself looked at over 450 publications. With respect to the conclusion on human health, there was not a conclusion that was presented, so there's more research required to understand exactly the impact of microplastic and the impact on human health of microplastic and their bioavailability through the food chain. So the conclusion had to do with microplastics and their impact on the environment.
How is this going to influence the creation of new regulations around plastics?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just ask for clarification on, like, I'm not certain what your question is.
Well, basically, you know, if there's substances that bioaccumulate, and we know that they're dangerous for whether it be marine systems, avian birds, or things like that, how are you going to create the regulations? How are you going to decide what? I just want to have an understanding of the processes. How are you going to do the regulations?
Thank you for this question, Mr. Chair. So with respect to the approach for regulatory and non-regulatory measures, we have laid out in our discussion document that the approach with respect to it. We are looking at specifically on the ban targeting those items that are found in the environment that are known to cause or potentially cause problems, where they're problematic, where we're not able to recover them, or where they're hindering the recovery system and they're not being recycled. And so that's the approach in terms of how we're targeting those items. With respect to other considerations on what other measures may be needed, we will assess the information that's put forward, including the additional research that's being undertaken, and that my colleague Marc Diorio and his team and colleagues elsewhere in the Government Canada are doing with respect to what their findings are, and will be guided with respect to that. On the other items with respect to the approach on the life cycle, there what we're targeting is actions to stop it from getting into the environment so that we don't have that problem, and to encourage the circularity and keep the value of the plastics in the economy and out of the environment. So looking at the specific considerations on how we can do that, for instance, with recycled standards, with compostability, etc. And I must say that the actions and the regulatory proposals, when they're put forward, they are done. We do that jointly with Health Canada, and we advance this work in cooperation with them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. The other thing that we heard was from industry is that there's a current patchwork of regulations across multiple jurisdictions, and sometimes this makes it difficult for them, and that there should be some unified regulatory framework that would create more certainty for business. Can you comment on that, as how consistent the unified regulations, how they would actually help businesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. So we have heard from industry about the importance of this. We've heard it in particular with respect to things like extended producer responsibility, where they want to have the same sort of rules that are applying across the country. Many of them operate in multiple jurisdictions and are needing to have that that consistency. When we hear from them about the importance of being able to define what the criteria is for things like compostability. So in the design of their product, they can make sure that it can be composted by the facility that's going to be using it. With respect to recycled content, it's understanding what types of plastics should be being handled. Can the recovery and recycling facility be able to manage it so that there's some specificity with respect to that, for instance? And all of this work is being advanced in cooperation with the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment and our provincial and territorial colleagues, so that we can look to see how we can put in place those elements. Some of these elements are being led by the Government of Canada, and we expect to put forward, for instance, proposals with respect to some of those standards, as my colleague Danny Drouin mentioned, for instance, through our work with the Standard Council of Canada and I'm going to get the acronym wrong, Le Bureau de Normes du Québec. Désolé, c'est pas le bon mot. That's not quite the right term, but through their Bureau for Standards as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we've actually reached 1 hour exactly to the minute, and we'll stop here. I want to thank.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick point of order when you're done.
Okay. I was going to actually suspend for a little while.
Very quick. There was some confusion with respect to a publication that was suggested was removed from the Government of Canada website, and though it's not on the ECC website, it is on publications.gc.ca, and I'm more than happy to provide the link to the clerk if that would help Mr. Redekop with his question.
Thank you. Good information. So I want to thank the witnesses. I have a feeling we'll be seeing you again at some point. I don't know when, but we've established a regular working relationship with our witnesses from the department. So thank you again. Thank you to the members. We're going to suspend and then go in camera for the second hour. So we'll see everyone again shortly, I'm sure. And I'm just going to disconnect now, and we'll reconnect under a new ID and password. Thank you. Oh yeah, the gavel.